Good morning, everyone. I just want to take a moment to make sure that everyone can hear me. So what I'd like to do is ask anyone to raise your hand on the panel on the right side of your screen there, just to let me know if you can hear me okay. Should be under the attendee list. You can raise your hand. Okay, there goes a hand. Hand went up there. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it. Outstanding. Okay. Very good. We'll just wait 1 or 2 more minutes. We had several more people signed up, so I'll just wait a couple more minutes to see if folks do arrive. I'd like to thank you all for taking a few minutes out of your day, your Friday, in this busy holiday season to join us for our Friday CAD Chat. Today's topic, as you can see, is going to be SolidWorks Composer. We just wanted to share a few tips and tricks, some thoughts that we've kind of had, discussions we've had with customers and classes and things of that nature that I put out there. Some of the reminders, just to remind you of some of the functionality. Some might be some new stuff. What's new stuff, maybe in 2014 and so on. So I just wanted to cover a few topics this morning, a brief half-hour visit in our Friday CAD Chat. I don't see anybody else joining us right now, so maybe this is going to be our attendee list. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining us. Today, I just want to remind you the control panel there on the right side, typically on the right side, can be collapsed if you click the little orange arrow button there, collapsing that down to the side. There you can see you can also ask questions and so on. I'll try and answer them later on as we get through the end of the presentation and discussion in today's chat. For our topics today, just a few things I wanted to kind of bring up once again was some notes about the preferences, just maybe reminders again. Reminders about document properties, settings there, tips about labels, maybe something new and you're not aware of, some capabilities. It does perhaps depend on the version you're working with. And I want to kind of segue into brief discussion about styles. Sometimes people aren't quite aware of what you can do with the style, so I want to touch on that. And a topic that's come up a few times in the past couple of months is the cutting planes, making sections and so forth inside of Composer. I want to talk about that briefly. Applying changes to specific faces of an actor. That's another thing that's kind of come up from time to time in the past few months. And finally, just a little bit final note on detail views. A couple of ways you can create details, and I wanted to kind of highlight a few notes there for you. I do apologize for that. Just a moment, please. There we go. Sorry about that. I should have muted that phone right away. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me jump right into Composer here. Make sure you all catch up with me. I'm going to open up a quick file here. Here we go. I think it's about there. Okay. So just very quickly, I'm going to go into view mode here. Just a couple of simple views. I want to start off first by talking about the preferences, if you don't mind, for a quick point. Under the File menu up here, we can select in the bottom right-hand area Preferences that we can see here. Selecting Preferences, I just wanted to note for you something that comes up from time to time. It does depend on your graphics, your system, and so forth. Performance settings, I guess, performance issues. And a note I want to highlight for you is up here in the right-hand corner of this Preferences window is a profile. It can be beneficial just to change the profile setting. There's 3 main settings: standard, high quality, high speed, but there's also one called safe. The safe profile does modify some of those hardware acceleration settings and so on for the graphics cards, because most of the performance issues we tend to see are kind of focused around the graphics card or drivers for the graphics card. I'll select here, in this case, hardware support to highlight. These are the options that are kind of being modified. So as I select the different profiles, standard for instance, or high speed, and safe, you can see disables hardware acceleration and kind of takes the graphics card settings out of the equation. Then we can kind of generally see if it is a graphics card situation or graphics card driver. Again, sometimes it's beneficial to stay on top of that, make sure you've got the proper drivers installed for your system. So it might be something just to highlight once again. If you're having some issues, if you're seeing some issues, this might be a very quick way to quote-unquote troubleshoot some of that. Another thing I might want to point out is over here on the viewport, this is where you can tweak individually some of those settings about the shadows, and pixel per pixel lighting conditions, hardware anti-aliasing, and so on. You can modify a little bit of this to see if that does help adjust some of your performance. But generally speaking, I would really just say go with this profile settings to really get that set up. Also in the preferences, I wanted to quickly note, because it's come up from time to time, there is on the general selection here on the left, you'll see that there is these two options to reset prompts or reset GUI layout. That's graphical user interface. And in many cases, people have accidentally or otherwise dragged things off and floated them. Like the panels here, you can see they can float, or you can dock them in different locations around the screen just by hovering over these little widgets. As I come back over here, I can post that back up top just like that. Sometimes it can get a little out of control and folks aren't quite clear on how to put things back. So if you happen to get in a situation like this, if you go to File, Preferences, and on that general Reset GUI layout, that should fix everything sort of back to the way things were. All right, putting things, in this case, back into the right tabs and the right locations and so on. The other point I want to make under Properties, in the same area, File, Properties, this again maybe just a reminder, but when you're talking about the properties, you do have to consider the document you've got open versus the documents you're going to create, okay, in the future. As you create a document and save it, it now has its document properties set in it. There are two options that are relevant here under the properties: document properties or default document properties. The first applies to the open document, which is important to note because if you don't have a file open, let me just close this up, and you go to File, Properties, you'll note it's not grayed out and non-selectable. So if you have a document open, that's going to apply, as I said before, to the existing open document. So let me just quickly open that up again. Any changes you make will apply to this file. The default document properties will apply to any files you create in the future and have those settings applied to them. So it's important to, perhaps as you get started working with Composer, go into this area here for the default document properties and really set this up properly the first time out. An option we often highlight is merge file into one actor per part. That is disabled, and it's often recommended to have that checked when you're converting files and bringing them into Composer. So under Input on the left side, selected, it might be a good idea to check that option to merge those into one actor per part. Some of the other things that I might say is you can have the security settings. This is something that should be considered carefully, and that has to do with setting a password. Please, if you get into that kind of practice or put into the affect these security measures, be sure to have that password annotated somewhere. That's important to keep that in mind. Okay, and there's other options, of course, here that you can set up with the update options and so on. That I just want to point out again. This is the default settings. What the default document settings will be on those files you create in the future. Okay, so if you set up the papers space and so on, that's going to be anything you create in the future, but it does not affect any files you currently have open. That would be the other option. Okay, just a quick reminder about that. So let's go ahead and talk about a few more things. I'm going to switch back into view mode here. I thought it'd be nice just to talk a little bit about labels. When we talk about labels, we're creating these from the Author tab. The very common practice to add labels, of course, and when we're adding these labels, we're always adding them based off of a standard or a default setting, and that's typically in the Styles area. Here, for the type of function you've got, or type of entity you've got selected, you can see here the default would be selected typically as default, and you can set this as default through the right mouse menu, set that as default. You can also subscribe things to that by simply selecting that. To create a, okay, wouldn't be a good demonstration without it. Sorry about that. Give me just a second. Oop. All right, there we go. So when we're creating these labels, I wanted to touch on the styles workshop, because here's where we can set up these different styles, and you can see there's some labels. There's also other objects, be it balloons and so forth. So in the styles workshop, I'm going to try and run through this very, very quickly. Styles. You can also just get it from the drop down here as well in the workshops area, styles. You can see there are several already selected in defaults. To create a new one, it's not difficult at all. We can simply create the new style by clicking the new sheet here on the toolbar inside the workshop. Give it a name. My labels sounds good. In the list below is where we're going to set several of the settings for our new style. First of all, I'll select from the profile annotations, and you can see you can pick different things like callouts, annotations, magnetic lines, and so on. This kind of helps on what options, what properties you can go ahead and set from. Scrolling down, of course, you can go ahead and see different options in the way in which we want these to be set. And when I go into selecting, let me go ahead and put a label out there. Actually, I wanted to put one out there. There we go. Okay, so with my labels, now we've got the annotation set as a family. For the text, I'm going to change that text size to maybe 18. We can change the text as to what's going to be populated. You can always enter that in there if you want to. You can also change the text to be maybe the actor's name, the tooltip name, which is commonly a default. Maybe if there's meta properties coming in from the SolidWorks files, you can do that here as well. So I can select that as my setting for this style. Down below you can also set the attach option. Maybe I set the different for the different leader. Set the color, and again you can go as far as you want to. If you want to add borders and so on and so forth, I'll go ahead and say show the border, and we'll pick a rectangle. Maybe we'll choose that. Make a few changes here. There we go. Okay, so it's essentially saving this all as I'm going. Now, if I select the Styles tab, we should be able to see the My Labels, and I just pick it to assign my label to that. But again, if I'm going to add a new label through the Author tab, if I add a new label, it's using the default. So if I want that to become the default, again, I will have to right-click, Set as Default. That way, whenever I'm adding a new label of any kind, it's going to use that as the default setting. So just a really quick rundown on setting these styles and working with different formats, basically different options. You can just quickly pick your annotation items, whatever the entity might be, and set the style for that very quickly using styles. You can also, I should point out, map the paths to maybe a network shared location and have the style XML file. It's an XML file. Those style files stored up on a shared drive where everybody in the company who uses Composer is accessing the generic styles for the company. Nobody's trying to work from their own style files, kind of going rogue. So that's something, if you have multiple users, to maybe consider. So that's just a quick little discussion about the labels and creating styles. Let me touch on the cutting planes for just a minute. We'll go ahead and here's a quick tip. Selection. I can go into the selection options and just pick the geometry, or just pick collaboration actors, being the labels. I'm going to turn off geometry. That way when I do a window select, I only select the labels. Good. Put that back. So just a quick tip there. So once we have this, I want to just talk about sections. So if we want to create a section view, it's in the Authors tab. You'll see Cutting Plane, and there's the Create option. A couple of things I can do is just click it. Once it's clicked down here, once again you're watching the bottom, the blue bar at the bottom is asking me to pick a point. I have an option, as it says here, hold down the Alt key to align to an axis. That's kind of interesting. As you can see, as I move over the faces of our geometry actors, it kind of aligns itself normal to those actors and on the point I'm hovering over. But if I hold down the Alt key and then hover over circular edges of the actors, it snaps to the axis. So I'm going to center it along the center of that shaft. Just hold down the Alt key and then left click. It's now placed it on the screen, but a little bit wonky of an angle. With it selected, I'm going to go ahead and go over here to the axis, and here's where you can pick what axis you want to be on. So I'll just pick the Y-axis. That kind of aligns itself to the Y plane, which is perfect. So I'm centered now on the Y plane, on the top plane basically. There's a few things you can see here now with this cutting plane. You can set color, you can set options that are very helpful. You can tell it to cut or not by choosing the option there, showing the cutting lines. You can tell it to keep the actor colors if you'd like to keep those colors instead of having one general color for the cutting surface and section and so forth. You can control the hatching, okay, how much hatch goes on down here. You can hatch it a lot or a little. You can use the option to hatch by actor, which will alternate, if you will, the sections. You can see you can change those angles pretty quickly and easily there. So there's a lot of little options you might be tweaking. Okay. Another quick point is to highlight over on the collaboration tab is where we now see under cutting planes, the group on cutting planes here, where we can hide it, I should say turn it on or off. But in doing so, you can see it's going to cut it or not cut it because you're turning it off. So if you don't want it visible, reminder just really quickly, you often want to control through the opacity property of the object and the actor. So I can turn that opacity down very easily to essentially hide the plane itself, the cutting plane itself. So that's all well and good, but what we do get asked quite often is how can I do a sort of compound section view if I want to have multiple section cuts out of this. You can actually incorporate more planes. So what I can do, cutting planes. So I can create one more cutting plane here, hold down the Alt key, and I'll again align that to the center. This time I'll take that to the X. And you notice when I added this plane, the other cutting plane got turned off immediately. If I have them both turned on, this is where you can actually get that compound cut that you're looking for. But again, you want to maybe cut a wedge out that's not quite what you're looking for, you're not there yet. You can select the plane, and on the cutting planes group, you'll see this option to flip it. So you might need to flip each one individually, one at a time. But as you can see, again, it's not quite what we're looking for. This is where perhaps what you're actually trying to achieve is going to require to use what's called the union mode. So select with control both of those cutting planes, enable the union mode, and you can see there that now you're cutting it the little wedge out that you were hoping for. So once again, you might need to just go through here and flip, using these little options to flip it to get the right plane, the right wedge, and so forth. Hopefully once you're finished, again, you can see here what you end up with what you're looking for. Hopefully. So that's something that's come up a bit in the past, and I thought it important just to highlight for us all to see the results that we're looking for. Once again, you definitely probably need to hide. In this case, we just make transparent that cutting plane. The other thing I would point out is with the cutting planes option, you do have the apply to selection. Now I've noticed in many cases you might use some of the selection methods. Select a group of actors perhaps, and then you can right click and the selection options to invert selection, so you can invert what you've got selected. I'm sorry, over here, selection tool. Drop down, there you go. Invert selection quickly selects everything but what you've got selected, and vice versa. So you can maybe do that very quickly, select everything you're looking for, and then you would simply use this apply to selection. In doing so, you're saying only section those items that I've now selected. You might need to keep tweaking with that, playing with that, okay? But this is a great way to essentially section certain components and still see the internal components. It is tricky, however, if you see a component you meant to pick or you didn't mean to pick, you'll have to make sure you pick the entities again. So if I use this apply to selection, you can see now it's only applying to the shaft. So it's something you're going to have to probably play with a little bit. And I'll just pick these components here real quick and apply selection again. Keep selecting what you want, and so on and so forth. So it's going to take a little bit of work perhaps to get it tweaked just right, but hopefully you end up with all the items that you're looking for. Okay, so it's a little bit about section views. Just a quick reminder, really quickly again, that you can ask questions in the questions panel on the right side in the webinar panels. I just want to mention that again in case you do have anything that comes up. So it's just a little bit about section planes. Now let me go ahead and turn those off. And two more things I wanted to highlight, and we're working good on time, very good. And that has to do with, first of all, what if you wanted to apply appearance to a specific face? Let me go ahead and just select this bolt, for instance. I'm going to just show this and hide all the other actors there. Okay, turn the ground off. In some cases, you want to apply a color to maybe just the head of this bolt, but in this case, we can't. If we try to select a specific face, it's going to be applying that color, of course, to the whole actor. So that's oftentimes difficult for us to do. How can we apply that specific color to that specific actor? To do that, we'll need to explode it. And if we select that actor and go under Geometry, we can use the Explode function here. Once you do that, be aware, it will, of course, show a whole bunch of new actors in that tree. My recommendation, undo that, is to select the actor. Make a copy of the actor. With that actor selected on the Geometry tab, you can copy it. Maybe then just turn off the original so you don't have or don't affect that. Okay? So with the copy, we'll explode. And now we can go ahead and select all the individual actors. Let me do a window left or right. There we go. And then we can apply different colors to that actor, those actors. And there you go. You have those actors now all updated with the right color. And there is an option to then merge. You can see here merging those. You can't undo the merge, so it's something to consider. But now that I've merged it, you see it created a new object, which is all of those individual faces back into an individual single actor. So that's one option available to you in a way you might need to. Now the only caveat I would, big word for the day, caveat. The only caveat I would have to that is that if you plan to update your documents, okay, and I'm going to turn everything back on again, but then hide that original bolt again so we don't see it. Okay, if you're going to update this document with the original again, or maybe the CAD files again, you have that opportunity, of course, when you go into File and you use the update function. So if I were to update that back to the original oil pump, there is the point that it will essentially get rid of that bolt. Now the original bolt is still there. Okay. Another good reason not to destroy it, but make a copy of it. The reason that it deleted is there's no GUI ID. There's no ID for that new actor. So if you update to the original file, it won't see it and will delete it from your Composer file, so that now your Composer file is what the new file is supposed to be updated to. Goes into a lot of discussion that we have discussed in training class before, if you've ever been in training, but it is something to consider, that if you do update these documents and you're working side by side with engineering as they do revision controls and things like that, some of these functions might not be the best option for you, okay, because of the fact that it will delete them or possibly overwrite your files. Get rid of those, okay? Finally, and perfect time, I've got 5 minutes left. I don't see any questions yet. Just a quick reminder, if you have any, please feel free to post them. I just want to cover detail views because that's another option that comes up quite a bit. There's several ways to create details, shall we say, panels for your views. To accomplish this, first I'll touch on a couple of ways in which you can do that. Let me hit the workshop. Post that open again. If I go to the high resolution image workshop, you'll probably notice there is a high resolution detail view here. Of course, again, it's very relevant what your options are, what profile you might be selecting here, and it sets the pixels, DPIs, and so on. So if I choose that detail view checkbox in the high-res workshop, you'll see here it gives you a little window. This window allows me to resize it, position it. I would submit that in this case you might want to highlight only certain actors, so you need to first do the selection method. So I'll do a hide, show selection, hide others, and then with my detail view I just want to highlight and make a detail of this bolt. So I can resize this square, this rectangle, pretty easily here. You have options, of course, for high resolution if you want to turn on anti-aliasing. Again, it makes a difference what your settings are here for the resolution itself and so on. And then when you're ready, just click Create. That will create a 2D panel, as you can see up here in the corner, and then just close this with the X. That 2D panel is now available. Now, if I hide that for a second, I'll go ahead and go back to the assembly tree and show everything. There we go. So this gives me an opportunity to go back to my collaboration tab. Under my panels, I can turn that image back on again. And there's my 2D detail view. Another option is through the technical illustration workshop. Once again, if I wanted to, I can go ahead and highlight just that component. So let me do this. Got the wrong one. There we go. With this technical illustration workshop, this is going to create a vector detail, which is different from the raster 2D that we just captured. Raster tends to be more pixelated and so forth. Vector is more crisp. As you zoom, you don't lose some of the fidelity. Here, similar function I can see here. Just moving this around and positioning this, zooming in if you want to get it nice and big inside that little window. And once again, setting the options you want. And when you're ready, just click the Create button. That will create, in this case, a vector 2D detail. It will be black and white, or you can use the color regions if you want. But generally speaking, that's a different option. Once again, the crispness that you get with this is going to be a little bit better, a little bit clearer. Turn all that stuff back on again. Go ahead and zoom back out again. And I'll go back and turn on the 2D detail view. Oops. There we go. So it might be difficult to really make out on the screen, but as I zoom in tighter and tighter, the vector being made up of lines and actual quote-unquote geometry is more crisp and clear than what you'll see perhaps with the actual raster, which as I zoom in on it can tend to be washed out and pixelated. Okay, so just a couple of quick notes there. And this leading to all of this discussion leading to this point that we often get discussions and calls about during class or during a tech support call. Let me hide these real quick. The digger. Everybody's kind of familiar with the digger. Now you might have noticed that using that higher res image workshop or the technical illustration workshop, you basically need to set the scene. But with the digger, which I can turn on with the space bar, or on the Home tab, turn on the digger up here, we can have these tools, right? We can always use the onion skins and the x-rays and the cutting planes, and we have the zoom option here. So if I'm using, say, the onion skin, and I set my focus over here to point to something, my center of interest, as it were, or if I'm doing a detail view and I set my interest over here and set my focus and zoom and so on. What's relevant, and the reason I brought this back up and made sure that this panel is open, is the high resolution image workshop. That's very relevant in this case because, again, it's taking these settings and using those resolution settings for this snapshot you're about to take. So it's important that you do have it set up properly. Maybe you even go ahead and set up a profile. You can create a new profile and you can simply call it digger And in that profile, you set those pixels maybe pretty high. You set the DPI, dots per inch, pretty high as well. That's going to actually, of course, really influence the size of this image, but and size of your file for that matter. But now when I use this capture, I'm going to get a nice, hopefully crisp image, whereas if I had used one of the smaller, lower resolution, I'll just take another one very quickly to wrap this up down here. Using that profile and having these settings set up, I'll go ahead and take that image. I think you can probably make out the difference for sure, even on that screen that you're looking at. With these two images side by side, very crisp at the top, very washed out and pixelated down at the bottom. Okay, so again, it's very, very important, very relevant when you're using the digger and capturing some 2D details and so on, what your high resolution imaging settings were or are at the time. So it's important to bring up the panel and just have a quick peek on that workshop. Okay. All right, I think that covers it. We've hit quite a few topics just real quick short time. Talked about some of the preferences, just a reminder about document properties versus default document properties. There was one other quick tip I wanted about the labels. Wanted to mention about the labels. 2014, if you have Composer 2014 or higher, kind of a nice little enhancement they had in 2014 if I were to add a label. Just really quickly. They have this neat little option over here when you look at the properties of that actor. It's called wrap. The wrap option under text, if you were to enable it, it does have a wrap width default setting, somewhat 15 millimeters in this case. But what's interesting to point out is you can see here, you can grab the grip up at the right and you can control that wrap setting dynamically regardless. It'll change that width wrap setting, or you can set it. So that's a nice little quick tip I wanted to share with you, 2014 or higher. Okay. Meant to point that out. So the tips about label, some talk about the styles, also the cutting planes discussion where you can use your union mode and use that flip function to get that section cut out. And again, you can involve more than two planes, cutting planes if you want. I just used two as an example. How do we apply changes to specific faces of actors and so on? We use that explode, and then we could always use that merge function again. Detail views there at the end, talked about detail views using the high-res image workshop and the technical illustration, and the importance of watching that high-resolution image workshop when you're trying to use the digger and what settings you might have there. So what questions? Let's see if we have, oh, we do have some questions now. There we go. Is there a way to save the styles and settings as a backup? No, not exactly. Now, the styles, I'll point out here, when you go into the file preferences, you have the data paths. Excuse me. In the data paths under these profiles is where you can see the settings for their styles. So it's going to my user folder, right? So typically you might back those up. Again, they're XML files. Okay, so if I browse into that user folder, again, it's in my Documents, SolidWorks Composer user, you can see here are the data paths. Under the Profiles folder is where you can find some of those XML files. Let's see if I can, if they're there. No, I got to store somewhere else. And basically the XML files, I just want to make sure this is clear, just sort of data structure files. If I open up with XML editor, you can see they're kind of structured in a data fashion, as it were. So the files themselves can be backed up. I guess is my long story short. Those files being backed up would be essentially the backup of those settings. Okay. Hopefully that addresses, in particular, if you're putting it on the network, that folder is perhaps already being backed up, so that's probably going to handle that. Any other questions really quickly? Let me go back to the slide. Anyone else have any questions? Show us an animation. Show you an animation. Okay. Animations can be created in a couple of different ways, but for the most part, if I switch over to animation mode, you can see here there's a basic one. I can just play it. Just basically it's animating zoom and an explode, if you will, of that clip. Nothing too exciting. I guess if I was to go ahead and just delete all the keys off of here, I can show you very, very quickly. I think maybe your question is, how do you create animations using Composer? I'm thinking, but so if we're just doing a camera orientation, we can use camera keys. Again, on the animation toolbar, set key captures the current. Okay, yes, he is. Yes, we set the keys to capture cameras, capture diggers, or capture actor properties, be it position or property settings. So here I can capture that camera key. I then position myself at a position point in time, like 1 second. I rotate my view to where I want the camera to be looking, and then I capture that camera key there. So what I've done essentially is just animated the rotation to that point very quickly and very simply. So this is the key animations is what we're doing. If I could just mention, oftentimes what we talk about in class is people forget to do one important step. When you're doing the keyframe animations, you want to capture the actor's current settings. So say for this cover, if I were to want to make that transparent at this point in time, what I might want to do is not set it transparent now, because it'll essentially be going transparent from 0 to 1 second. But perhaps I go back to about a half a second, and then I would capture its settings, quote unquote, by using the capture key or set key. So it's captured all the properties and position of that actor. Then I can tell it at 1 second I want you to be faded out, so I can then change the opacity by dragging the opacity down and making it transparent. So what it's going to do essentially is start from half a second and become transparent at 1 second. You can see there. And without going into, again, a lot of detail, that's essentially the steps or process that we follow. And in setting these properties, it could be any number of things. The only caveat I would have, again, I'm using that word, but if you look at certain properties, they may have a little red circle. It's hard to notice, but it's a red circle with a slash in it. It's pointing out that these properties are not animatable. Okay, they can't be set through an animation. All right, but for the most part, any other properties you see here can be set and animated. So you can have things, of course, changing colors during an animation. Position is a pretty simple one. Once again, maybe I take this nut, I set the location key here at 1 second, and then at 2 seconds I set its position and where I want it to be. So I'd use the translate tool. Now notice I'm rotating and zooming and so on, but I'm not capturing the key, the camera. So I'll just animate this out of frame, if you will. So if it created a new key right there automatically because we have auto key on. So really quickly you can see it's going to animate as it gets to 1 second. It starts to then explode the nut like that. And that's basically the process. Hopefully, I mean, that's a short nickel tour of animations, but that's how you would create the animations through animation mode in Composer. You bet. I can't quite see who that is. You bet, Anthony. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, thoughts, or concerns? Don't see any more. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. Then it's okay. We didn't go too far over. I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. Here's a quick little reminder, by the way, some of the phone numbers. If you have any questions, you're on support, feel free to email us at support@progressiontech.com. Our support number or line extension is extension 2. Feel free to give us a call if you need any help. Also, just a quick reminder, the next webinar, CAD Chat, will be Friday, December 19th. Going to be talking about a little bit of electrical, what's new in 2015 discussion. So hopefully join us then. And if we don't talk, I just want to wish everyone a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and so on. Be safe, be secure, and the best to all your families.